I was looking at any other denomination I possibly could because I did not want the church to be true. It was a cult. It's a cult, you know? I was like, I was raised in a cult. I was just believing all of the things that I saw online and like all of those ex-Mormon TikTok creators.
We are so excited to tell you guys about the Come Back to Christ event Friday, September 5th from 6 to 9:30 and Saturday, September 6th from 9 to 2. It will be located at the Utah Valley Convention Center in Provo, Utah. Tickets will go on sale around the middle of June, so stay tuned for more details. It sold out really quick last time, so if you guys want to come, I would suggest getting your tickets really quickly. The event was incredible. You do not want to miss this. If you're interested in being a sponsor of the event, you can email info.comebackpodcast@gmail.com. We're also looking for vendors to set up at the event. You can sell your crafts and goods and different things like that. If you're interested, you can email us at info.comebackpodcast@gmail.com. Also, Comeback Podcast is officially a nonprofit. This is so exciting. It's something we've been working for and dreaming of for a while now. And to keep this going, we would love if you were interested in donating to the cause. So for more information, you can email us at the same email address, info.comebackpodcast@gmail.com. Sage, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. I saw your Instagram reels that you made, and I was like, oh my gosh, we've got to get her on. I had like 3 people send me your reels, and they were like, are you going to have her on the podcast? Because you need to. And would love to hear a little bit about you. I know you're in Lehigh. You just got a new puppy. What else is a little bit about you before we jump into your story?
I'm going into medical. I'm going to start at MTech soon to get my MA so I can hopefully, fingers crossed, go into pediatrics. Like, that's the goal. But yeah, I have a service dog. His name is Noodle. I'm starting to train him. It's been super fun, but it's okay. Give it a couple of weeks and he'll be sleeping through the night. Besides that, I'm an artist. I have a lot of tattoos and people are like, oh, because I've gotten them like after I've reconverted. So people are like iffy on that. But yeah, I don't know. That's a little bit about me. I've done theater, I've done art, I've done all of like the creative things like that.
It's interesting because I was literally just talking to my parents about this because my nanny, I work from home, and so she's here and we are just like best friends because we spend so much time together. She also has a comeback story and she also gets tattoos, and I was talking to my parents about it and I said, there has been a shift in the church recently. I love how young people today, they feel like there's still a place for them. Even if they want to get a tattoo, there is still a place for you in the church. And I love that. You feel welcome in the church because you are here for your relationship with God. You don't care what people think. You're doing you and you choose the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I think that is so beautiful.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also just important to show like a lot of people who are converts to the church, they have tattoos, and it used to be like in the handbook that it's not allowed. And now that they've taken out of the handbook, like the piercings and tattoos, I feel like they're kind of showing my generation. They're noticing a lot of people leaving, coming back, that you're still welcome back, even if you've, you know, had those like modifications to your body. And I always say, like, some people like this saying, some people are like, what are you even talking about? But I always say that God has bigger problems than permanent ink on a temporary vessel. Because like, when Jesus comes again, I'm not going to have those tattoos, and he's not going to send me to hell for getting a tattoo, especially if it's not blasphemous, if it's not making fun of any group of people, and it's not harmful to yourself or others. If it has meaning behind it, if it is just something that's beautiful that you connect with, God's not going to have a big problem with that. You know, he might be like, oh, I mean, you got a tattoo, but he's not going to be like, shame on you. Yep. Like some people act like he would be.
The place that I'm in with it is, would I personally choose to get a tattoo? Like, no. But do I totally respect your agency and your decision to do what you feel is right for you? 100,000%. Also, the gospel isn't black and white.
No.
It is golden. It is about choosing and living the gospel. It's not about like checking this box, and checking this box. It is about
Exactly.
the gospel of Jesus Christ.
And it's a very Utah thing to check the boxes, but like I recently went and experienced a Polynesian ward for the first time, and so many of the people there still drank and they still had tattoos, but they all at the end of the day saw, hey, I'm not a perfect person, but I'm still going to come to church on Sunday. I'm still going to worship Christ, share my testimony, and learn to love him, come closer to him. Just because you're making some decisions that other people might not think is right does not mean you do not have that understanding of Christ or that relationship with Christ like they do.
I love it. Well, let's jump into your story. I am so excited to hear.
Okay. Well, I grew up a member. Well, my dad is also or was a reconvert. He ended up passing away when I was little. He again like left the church for a while. He was gay, like he felt judged and stuff. So he left the church, lived that lifestyle, drank, smoked stuff, and then he came back to the church. But after he passed, it was just me, my mom, and my two younger sisters. I was always a little bit of a pushier kid. I was always a little bit stubborn, kind of my way or the highway. But as I grew up, I was very much a weird kid who never really fit in. And I never had friends, and I always had that desperate just need to find some kind of belonging. And even like growing up, the girls and young women were never really the nicest to me. I never really had friends. Even like the kids that people would consider the weird girls kind of pushed me aside. So I never really found my place in that belonging in the church, which I felt like it is kind of part of the reason I started to drift a little bit when I got into middle school, especially like ninth grade. And that's kind of when I was first really exposed to like, you know, sex, drugs, teen pregnancy, you know, just all the really fun things of the world and all the really worldly things that were just really cool and really like, if you don't do this, then you're not cool, I guess. And I still went to a really like LDS based church, like just in Highland, and I still like went to seminary and stuff, but I always felt more of a belonging with the kids that were doing the bad things and were doing like the things that were worldly and I guess I considered to be more cool and some people would. So I started to kind of drift to that. I found that they just kind of accepted me more. And then in high school, when COVID hit, I never had a phone growing up. My mom was very like, no about that. I'm glad she was, because when I did have access to the internet, I was making not good choices. And so when I did get my iPad in 2020, because my mom was like, ugh, my like kids are fighting. I need to do something about this. So I had a lot of internet access and I found this app called Yubo. And it's basically like Tinder for teens finding friends. So like you would swipe on people and like they would have bios, but you can also like go live with them and like talk with them and meet them. But I actually found a group that I considered like my best friends. Some of them lived out of state, but some of them just happened to live in Provo. I was a little bit of a weirder kid. At the time, I was kind of leaning more toward alternative fashion and like, you know, the rock and metal. And I've always loved horror and like all of those things. So I felt more of a belonging with this group who was like the gay, alternative, the weirder kids. And I would spend like 8 to 10 hours every single day just talking to them, shut out my family, would fight my mom to go to church. She always made me go to church, which I'm grateful for. But at the time, like TikTok was also becoming really popular. And I happened to land on ex-Mormon TikTok and witchcraft TikTok. And so I started looking into like paganism. And I started buying crystals and herbs and candles. And I started doing some really not okay things. I actually live in the house that like right now I moved back in to the house that I used to practice in. And I know that there's like things in the house because I just invited them in. But yeah, I started, you know, really getting into like witchcraft and practicing and hexing people and worshiping other deities. Like it got to the point where I was like saying prayers to like Aphrodite and stuff. I was very far down that path, and the group was also encouraging. I mean, like, I don't want to say that they were encouraging because I still have my agency and I own that I still had that, but they would all vape. And I was like, oh, okay, so I guess it's cool. So then I became really addicted to nicotine. I started smoking weed. I always convinced my mom it was incense in the basement, so she never really found out. But I was, you know, getting high. It got to the point where like a couple of times I tried Xanax, and a couple of times like I tried harder drugs like cocaine and acid. And I was just really far down that path of practicing witchcraft. And I didn't see anything, I guess, coming from it. Like, I never got any of those things that people were like, oh, well, if you mix this herb and this crystal and, you know, this into a jar and seal it, then you'll get this in your life. I never saw those things. So after a couple of years, I just kind of stopped practicing those. Probably like a year and a half. I was like, okay, like, I'm not reaping any rewards, but I still didn't want the church to be true in a way. Like, part of me, it was like a guilt thing. I didn't want to have to face what I had done, but also I didn't want my mom to be right, and I didn't want my friends to be wrong, and I didn't want the world to be wrong, because the world is very anti-Mormon. The world is very anti-Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I just kind of didn't believe in anything. I kind of knew that there was a God, but I'd refer to him as the universe, and it got really bad. And then after COVID, after I graduated high school, I'd always overly sexualized myself as a teenager and a kid because I was exposed to pornography at a really young age, grew up with a really bad porn addiction. But as soon as I turned 18, I decided to start selling content and making content. I didn't have an OnlyFans, but I did have a Twitter that I would make content on. I never showed my face, which I'm so grateful for, but I still was selling my body, and I was basically just selling my soul. And I did that for months, and I made okay money off of it. And like, that's the part I really wish I didn't make good money off of it. But at the time I was working at Hot Topic, like I was making $13 an hour there. So I was making a couple extra hundreds of dollars a month online. I was like, okay, like I can do this. I'm fine with this. And then it got to the point where one day I just kind of like looked at myself in the mirror. I was like 260 pounds at the time, nicotine addict. I had completely cut God out of my life. My family, my relationship with my mom was completely down the crapper. I was just really kind of emotionally abusive, I would say, to my sisters. All I would do was just yell at them all the time because I wasn't happy, so why should they be happy? And I was just negative. I would just lock myself in my room and not talk to anyone, really. And I kind of looked at myself in the mirror one day and I was like, what am I doing? Like, what is this? You know, I don't remember exactly what I did that night, but I remember there was a little bit of a slow shift where I was working at Swig at the time. All of my coworkers were all LDS Christian, good people. And because I'd quit Hot Topic, so I started working at Swig. Best job I've ever had. It was such a community. These kids were all the positive influence I needed, and I'm still really close with a lot of them to this day. And it's been like 4 years, but you know, they would talk about church and they would talk about Christ, especially this one. His name is Tavish. He's actually on his mission right now. Oh my goodness, I'm so grateful for Tavish because he always kept a little bit of that spark alive for the church while I was looking into coming back to Christ and God. And I was looking at any other denomination I possibly could because I did not want the church to be true. It was a cult. It's a cult, you know? I was like, I was raised in a cult. I was just believing all of the things that I saw online and like all of those ex-Mormon TikTok creators. There's like this one that I was super addicted to. She has like this black bob. And I remember I would just watch her videos and I'd feel so negative. And it started building kind of a hatred towards my mom and my family because she would still make me go to church. And I do have POTS, so at the time, because I was a lot heavier, my symptoms were a lot worse. I did not go to church every Sunday because I couldn't really physically get myself out of bed all the time. But also, I would use it as an excuse to not go to church. And I'd use it because when I went to church, I would kind of have to face, you know, my true reality. And again, I did not want to do that. I didn't want to. I had let my temple recommend expire at this time. Like, I hadn't been to Young Women's. I stopped going to class. I'd go for like sacrament and then leave. I was looking into everything. I was looking into Orthodox Christianity, like Orthodox Catholicism. And I was looking into Baptist churches. And there's one in Alpine I attended. And I remember I was sitting there during the prayer. And I just kind of felt like, you know, like, this doesn't feel quite right. Like, I understand the concept, but something doesn't feel right. I've done a lot of, like, pro-life activism, anti-abortion activism, and so I used to attend this thing called 40 Days for Life, where it was, like, a whole bunch of people, like Lutherans and Catholics mainly, but they would go outside of the Planned Parenthood and they would have a little ceremony and they would pray, and again, the prayer just did not feel right. There's something about it. I would talk to one of my Lutheran friends about like what he believed. And I was like, yeah, like I feel kind of okay about that. But again, something didn't feel right. I was working at Swing at the time. The people had started kind of bringing me towards Christ. And then it was actually one night after my shift. I went home, changed, and then I picked up my sister. I was going to go to the gym. I didn't realize it closed early on Saturdays. So I was like, you know what, let's just go get a little treat. So I picked up my little sister. It was like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. The McDonald's by our house, of course, their ice cream machine was broken. And she really wanted an ice cream sundae. So I took her to the one in Saratoga Springs. And on our way back, I don't know if you're familiar with Lehigh, but the Pioneer Crossing intersection that kind of heads towards the McDonald's in Lehigh and the roller mills, I was turning left on that and I was T-boned. It was insane. We both had our seatbelts on, and the way that we were hit, the seatbelts caused some internal damage. So my sister, tough girl, tried to break through the windshield to get out. She actually was like halfway out, and the guy was like, dude, get back in the car. Like, sit still, somebody's coming for you. The ambulances came, they picked us up. And in the ambulance, I was in so much pain. They had me on a mix of ketamine and fentanyl, but I could still feel the pain. I just could not physically really say that I was in pain, but I could feel it. And I was able to ask one of the EMTs to say a prayer. It wasn't even a blessing. It was just to say a prayer. And he said the typical, I guess, LDS prayer. And I felt the Spirit so strongly. And I kind of knew at that moment I was going to be okay. And then after a couple days in the hospital, I had a ruptured spleen. Me and my sister both spiked a fever at the same time. We were rushed back for emergency exploratory surgery. She had 9 inches of her small intestine removed, and I had 2.5 feet of mine removed and 9 inches of my colon, and then I had my spleen sutured. It was about a month in the hospital for me and about 2 weeks for her, but it was just trying to, get back on my feet. I was on a feeding tube for a while after because I couldn't eat. And it was just a lot of healing. So I started to die before the surgery. That's why they took me back. And then after the surgery, I started to die again. And they put me in a medically induced coma. And I was in a coma for 32 hours. And I woke up with a ventilator like down my throat. And I was like choking. I couldn't breathe. It took them like 20 minutes to get to me. But yeah, I was in the ICU for a little bit. It's so crazy to think things like this can happen in such like a blink of an eye. And like, so fast, and everything could just be over so quickly. But one of the things that also really got me through it was my patriarchal blessing. I got it when I was about 14, before I started to really spiritually crash. And it has promises of my future and my kids and my relationship, and I kind of knew that I was going to get through it and I was going to be okay, because God had told me, like, if I followed him, I was going to experience these things. And I had never really experienced anything from my patriarchal blessing before. I was like, oh yeah, whatever. But as I've really like followed him and put him as my focus in life, I've really been able to be like, oh, that's what you meant by that. Like doing this whole social media thing. I didn't want to do that. I don't want to put myself out there and tell people all the mistakes I've made. And especially since there are people out there who have tried hanging it over my head and have tried, blackmailing me with that. And I'm sure you get it. I'm sure you've experienced the same thing where like friends of the past and stuff, when you tell them and you have like a bad friend breakup, they're like, oh, well, I'm going to tell people this. And I'm like, So I figured I would just, get it all out there, because if I tell you everything, what are you going to do? And if I bear my testimony and share what I know to be true, there's nothing you can do, It also has just made me more grateful for the little things. And even though I'm still experiencing like a lot of health issues after the surgery, like I have a rare condition from my surgery called small bowel syndrome, which makes it hard for me to absorb like vitamins and minerals, which makes it harder with my POTS. But I'm like, hey, God also saved me 1 inch of my colon. If I had had 1 more inch of my colon taken away, I would have had a colostomy bag. And God knew I could not handle a colostomy bag. He was like, hey, I will give you this 1 inch. And I think about that all the time, how sometimes like you can be so close to just like crashing and burning, but God will always give you that 1 inch. He will always keep you that little bit away from just completely crashing, even though it's so close and you're like, dude, come on, give me a little bit more. That 1 inch makes such a difference.
Yes.
And I hate to compare it to my colon, but it's so true. It's something I think about all the time.
Yes.
They're one of the friends that I had met online. I was still in contact with her. I met another friend who was also her friend who was a member of the church. Her name is Odilia. I love Odilia. Me and her still best friends to this day. It's been about 2 years that we've been close, but you know, I'd always see her post online about the church and the temple and stuff. And I started hanging out with her a little bit. I remember one year her boyfriend at the time was on his mission. And so we did like a little Valentine's thing where me and her just went to dinner. And I kind of knew at that time, like I could just feel the spirit radiating out of her. And I was like, okay. So we just started like talking about the church and our experiences at dinner. And then we drove home. And a couple of days later, I asked her if I could go to the temple with her. I'd kind of been attending church again at this time. Like I'd kind of gone back. But again, my heart wasn't in it. I didn't know if I fully had faith in the church. And I, like, a lot of, like, grubby past, it got to me and I let it get to me. And I was kind of more focused on that. And I knew how I felt when I read the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine. I'd never fully read through the Book of Mormon by myself, but I kind of knew, like, I did feel like a peace and a spirit about it. And so I did end up going to one of my bishop's counselors, and I was able to get my temple recommend just to go do baptisms. And I was like, you know what? Fine, let's do it. So I ended up going back to the temple with Odilia, and I just, like, the spirit I felt the first time was just absolutely insane. Like, for the first time, I felt closer to my Heavenly Father than I ever had. I felt my dad watching over me, and I felt him there, and I just felt all of the love and all of the peace. And I'm a very, like, spiritually sensitive person, I guess. And so, like, I could just feel, like, the spirits, like, around us, especially that we were doing work for. And after that point, me and Odilia started going to the temple weekly. And we did this for 9 months until she left on her mission. Like, I think we missed maybe 3 times. And then she left on her mission. You know, I continued going to church. I continued building my testimony. At that time, I was like, I know that this church is true. I was still a little bit in the world. So when people would, like, ask me about it, I was like, oh, like, I believe in the doctrine. I always do say that when people do, like, come after me and they're like, but what about how the church did this? I always say, the church is not perfect. You know, people have agency. We as humans have agency, but the doctrine is a perfect doctrine. The doctrine is a doctrine of Christ, and it came from God. And it's taken me a while to kind of build that, I guess, testimony of that, because it is hard to look past, you know, some of the things that have happened. But again, like, no church is perfect. No church has a clean history. No church has a clean past. And again, we have agency as humans. We mess up. We all make mistakes. It's part of our journey here on earth. But after a couple months of Odilia being on her mission, I got my full temple recommend to go and get endowed. And God kind of was like, hey, not yet. Like, I'm glad that you got this, but not yet. And so I waited for a couple of months after that. I met this boy who I absolutely am so in love with. We're on a little bit of a break right now, but that's okay. But as soon, like, what was it? 2 days after our first date, God said, now. And I went to, you know, set my temple day. I was driving on the freeway and I was like, oh shoot, it's game time. So I called the temple. I set that date. I got in like 2 weeks later and I was able to receive my endowments. And then the week after that, my sister who has autism was able to go through and get her endowments, and I was able to be there for that. It's been a process of just kind of, I guess, refinding my ground, because spiritual warfare is a real thing. Satan likes to, you know, send little bullets here and there. I've never been happier than I am when I'm in the church. I do know that the Bible is true, and that is a word from God. But I also have such a testimony of the Book of Mormon and, like, how it can change your life. And sometimes you're reading it and you're like, I don't know how this really applies to me. Like, especially Alma. The first time I read it, I was like, oh, this is just war. Like, what is it? Like, how am I supposed to relate to this? And then I would go back after something happened. I was like, oh, okay. Oh, okay. So, yeah, it's just been that process of kind of coming back. And now I'm here today. I have, like, this tattooed on my arm, which is Luke 22:42, which is not mine, but thine will be done. And I think about that all the time too. Like, you know, that car accident might have been part of his will. And I know that I need to go through what I've gone through so that I could help others in the future, and so that I could help people know that they're not alone, have more empathy for people, because I didn't realize how many people had a similar story to mine, or how many people are still going through things and feel alone, like they don't fit into the cookie cutter, typical Mormon, thing. And I mean, I hate to say it, but it's a very common thing in Utah. And it's a little scary, going to church with tattoos for the first time, or having multicolored hair and going to church, or dressing a certain way. But like, at the end of the day, we are all children of God. He's just happy to see us there. And even if you don't feel like you belong because he accepts you. You belong because you belong with Christ, not because you belong with the crowd, but because you belong with Christ.
Mm-hmm. You are so awesome. I love to see your stuff online. Like,
thank you.
You're such a light, and I love that you're using your story to inspire other people. There's enough negativity online. There's enough ex-Mormon TikTok. There's enough of that stuff. And to have you be sharing the other side of that is so incredible. I wonder, what advice would you have for specifically parents, like kids that are struggling with either the gospel or going to church or feeling like they fit in? What advice would you have for those parents?
I feel like a lot of the kids who are struggling with the gospel tend to be a lot pushier towards their parents. And so one thing I would say is, as your kids are growing up, if they have internet access, just monitor it and keep a close eye, because that's one of the things that really pulled me away to begin with, was the internet. It's a really scary thing. And I know it's such a common thing to talk about, but like, I wish I never had that iPad, and I wish that I, had never gone through what I gone through. I'm glad that I did, but a part of me is like, I wish I didn't have to do that and be exposed to all that. Another thing is, like, don't push the gospel down their throats, because you want to be able to have them grow in their own love for it. And I feel like as parents, it can be scary. It can be really scary to watch your kids, go down this path of just leaving God and leaving the church. And even if they don't come back here, there's always a chance for redemption, first of all. Second of all, just share with them what you know to be true without saying you have to do this. I mean, if they're young, if they're still living with you, go ahead. Make them go to church. Make them, it's part of just growing up and living with your parents. It's like rent. And I'm glad my mom did force me to go to church growing up, because if she hadn't, I probably would have steered further away. But also, just, it's so important to just love them and just let them know that you still love them, and that you still, I don't want to say necessarily that you accept them, but that you see them, and that you understand that they're going through what they're going through, that they're not alone, that they have their own path with God. But again, just sharing with them constantly what you know to be true and what you believe in, because it's so important. It really is. And I know that when we did do family scripture study growing up, it was harder to do it, and harder for my mom to find the energy to do it, because again, my sister has autism, and then it was my younger sister and me who was just grumpy about it. But I know when we did do it, I did pull little things from it, and it did have that little effect on me. But yeah, just kind of loving them through it, I guess, continuing to let them know, even if you are so angry at the decisions that they're making, don't let it show. Just, try to just still show them so much love, because that's so important. Because a lot of the time, the reason they're deciding to do what they do is because they feel more love and acceptance from the world than from you and God. And so it's just,
that is so true. I know that when I was younger and I was going through all my crap, I remember feeling so accepted by my friends, and that's where I belonged. And so I love that advice so much. Another question for you. You lost your dad when you were really young. What advice would you have for somebody that has lost a loved one like that, that's really affected by it?
One thing that I do, people think I'm a little crazy for it, is I talk to him all the time. And I know it's you can feel like you're just talking to yourself or you're talking to a wall, but they're listening. And they are doing so much work on the other side to protect you and to, try and keep you safe, to try and keep you on the right path. And that, you will see them again, because Jesus died for us, because of the plan of salvation, because of the atonement. You will be able to see them again, and you you have that chance and that opportunity, and that they're okay, where they are right now. They're happy and they're at peace. And again, it can be hard to believe, especially if you're not like a religious person, because, some people do believe like dead, you're gone, which I don't know how. That's absolutely crazy. But they are so there and they are so with you all the time. Keeping things that belong to them is also something I do. Like, I have a ring that I wear sometimes that was my grandpa's, and I have my dad's handwriting on my bicep from a note that he wrote me. But like, they are so near and dear, and even when they feel far, like that's probably when they're the closest to you, is when you feel distant from them. You just need to, look out for that. Visiting them will also help. I know, like, my mom, she hates cemeteries. She doesn't feel close to my dad when she visits, but I visit him all the time, like at least once a month. I'm talking to him like every single day, and I'm like, hey, dude, what is up with this? But, just keeping in contact with them. I don't want to say like you do God, but, talking to him throughout the day, just like you would, God, because again, they're still here. They're still with us. They still follow us on our daily activities, and they're still watching us. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's a way that I've kept that connection alive, and I've, really felt him present.
That's so beautiful. Well, Sage, you are awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And everybody needs to go follow Sage. Her Instagram is Return with Sage, right?
Yeah, I would really appreciate the follow, and all of the love that I've gotten the past little bit has been insane, because I've gained like 4,000 followers within the past like month.
People love to hear a comeback story, and you've got a great one.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Sage.
Thanks. Bye.
A lot of people have asked us how they can support the podcast, and we have created a Comeback Podcast merch line on our website, www.comebackpodcast.org. All of the money made from the merch goes right back into the podcast. So if you are interested in supporting the podcast and you want to purchase some merch, we would love it. Check it out. Thank you so much for being a supporter of the Comeback Podcast and listening to our episodes. It would mean so much to us if you would like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps other people be able to find us, and we want to share this message to everyone.